Week 4 Dana White's Contender Series is this week. I'm going to give you a prediction and breakdown of all 5 fights on this entire card. Last week we did not do very well, so the bar's set pretty low for this one. I think I can do pretty good here. The first couple weeks I actually did pretty good. I think I went like 3-2 or something like that. But again, last week, very rough card to go through. So it does happen with the Dana White's Contender Series. There's a lot of factors that go into it that can affect the fight, like fight IQ. You can't really tell fight IQ with some of these other fights. Maybe you can, but of course the opponents that they fight, the actual skills, like you never really know until they actually get in there. So if you do get a good underdog on this card, you're pretty happy, especially if you're betting really good underdogs on Dana White's Contender Series. But getting into this card, we have Carlos Prates versus Mitch Ramirez. And now this is going to be a very fun fight to watch. Carlos Prates is a very entertaining fighter. In his last fight, he won by KO against Eduardo Ramon. An absolute brutal head kick knockout. He KO'd him with like the knee. It looked very similar to like Sterling Moraes, except for Sterling kind of went out stiff and like had his arm like hanging out and all that. This guy kind of just fell backwards, but Eduardo Ramon just hit him with the head kick and then landed with the knee. Absolutely brutal. Even kind of similar to he dropped him, even though I don't think Moraes dropped him before then. I think he might have gotten a take, or maybe he did drop him, or Sterling tripped or something, and then Sterling got back up and then got immediately head kicked. It's kind of similar to that, but Eduardo Ramon landed a head kick and then like a straight, and then he went down and told him to get back up, and he landed another head kick. Kind of similar that way, but Mitch Ramirez, or I guess I'll get into the previous fight in LFA for Carlos Prates, but against Moacir Roca is how I think you say his name. He won by a head kick there by KO and then ground and pound as well. And then Mitch Ramirez over at XMMA beat Jeremy Holloway by KO due to like leg kicks. Absolutely tore up his legs in that fight. Went about 3 months ago there, beat Aide Majidine by KO about a year ago. Mitch Ramirez is a guy that is very, very solid on the feet and on the ground. I just don't see the X factor that I see kind of with Carlos Prates in this matchup. Carlos Prates has some decent takedown defense, and I'm not too worried about the takedowns of Mitch Ramirez in this matchup, especially against a guy in Carlos Prates who's very fast. He's very fast with his hands, very fast with his kicks. Mitch Ramirez, who did fight Jeremy Holloway, was kind of getting hit early on in that fight with some of the straights there, and I think he's kind of open for stuff down the pipe, and I think Prates can kind of set his kicks up, land some really good shots down the pipe, and I think Ramirez is very hittable. I think this is the first round finish for Carlos Prates. Land some good shots early on, and then maybe he stuns Ramirez a little bit and then lands a head kick or something. Maybe he tries to go for it. He has 2 head kicks in his last couple fights, so you might as well say that there. But I think this is going to be a really entertaining fight. I'm surprised they opened with this one. I feel like it should go more towards the end, but honestly, start with a bang, end with a bang. I don't mind it, but I am going to go with Carlos Prates by finish here. Maybe Mitch Ramirez can end up getting a finish, but I just don't see it. I think Carlos Prates is very, very good. But what do we see? Tapology has 81% for Prates in this matchup. I agree. 80% by KO, 11% by decision, and then 4% by submission. I think he does have a couple submissions on his record. I may be wrong. Yeah, I think he has 2, especially recently. No, it wasn't recently. It was actually another guy I was thinking about. But he has a lot of fights on his record, but has looked pretty good relatively recently. So I am going to go with Carlos Prates by KO in the late part of the first round. The card, we have Yousri Belgaroui versus Marco Tulio Silva. Now, this one's a very interesting matchup. I think this one could actually go either way. Yousri Belgaroui is making his way over from kickboxing. I believe he has fought Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya a total of like 5 times. He did lose that Israel Adesanya twice, both by decision and one being by split decision. Beat Alex Pereira in 2017 by decision and lost to Alex Pereira by KO in those later fights, and I think 2018 or whatever. But Yousri Belgaroui making his way over to MMA, 5-2 opponent, or 5-2 record, 31 years of age, 6'5", so he's a very, very big dude. And it seems like a lot of kickboxers are making their way over to the UFC. I think there was a previous Contender Series fight in the main event where we had another kickboxer who made his way over, who was training with Alex Pereira, I believe. So a lot of kickboxers are making their way over. They think they can do what Alex Pereira did. So we'll see what happens here. But Yousri Belgaroui, his last fight, beat Stefan Pretorius by KO, a 5-6 opponent there. Beat Bogdan Kotylevianov by KO due to a body punch, 10-11 record there. I think I just butchered his name, by the way. And then lost to Muhammad Oseli by decision, who was a 4-0 opponent. And I think he's like 5-3 5 and something now, like 5-2 or whatever. But Muhammad Oseli, I did watch that fight just to see how these guys are beating a guy like Yousri Belgaroui, who does have very good kickboxing, very good on the feet, has really good range, fast with his hands, very dynamic with the knees. There was a lot of kicks. And it was more of guys were able to kind of put him on his back foot. They were able to push him up against the fence, look for takedowns, and kind of just mix it up on him, make it very confusing for a guy like Yousri Belgaroui, who is making his way over to MMA a little bit later on in his career. And they're kind of making it very difficult. And a guy like Marco Tulio Silva, who does train at Shootbox Diego Lima, and you already know what that means. If you train out of Shootbox Diego Lima and you are at least somewhere around the UFC, you know they're very good fighters, at least a base good fighter, because they all kind of have the same style. You have Charles Oliveira, you have Mini Oliveira, you have Elvis Brenner, you have like Mateus Mendonca. I'm sure I'm missing someone. I guess Nascimento doesn't really have that much style. And I guess he does kind of have that style. At least recently, you've kind of seen it a little bit more, but he's more of a heavier wrestler at flyweight. But you see these guys that kind of just walk these guys down, and they take their punches. They don't really move their head, but they just go jumping front kicks like crazy stuff. All have really good grappling, of course. And Marco Tulio Silva is a guy that can definitely walk down a guy in Belgaroui, who, although he does have some very good stand-up, showed in his most recent fights that he does have improved takedown defense, even though they are not against good opponents, like a 5-6 guy, a 10-11 guy. But the 4-0 guy was able to take him down, was able to push him up against the fence, was able to land some really good shots. And Marco Tulio Silva does have a couple jumping front kicks, of course. He does train at Shootbox. But these are actually, just to note a little bit, Teixeira MMA and Fitness and Shootbox Diego Lima, two of the bigger Brazilian gyms. I guess Teixeira MMA and Fitness, I think, is like in Connecticut, but it is a very big Brazilian run camp. So I guess I'll kind of put it that way. But Shootbox Diego Lima, one of the bigger gyms in Brazil, of course. But this is a very interesting matchup. I am going to go Marco Tulio Silva. I don't know if he makes this one to a decision. I think Yousri Belgaroui does tire out a little bit more because I think of the clinching and the wrestling. I think it is going to tire him out. And I do think Silva can eventually catch him, but I don't know if he KOs him. Maybe I'll go by a decision here for Silva. Maybe actually I wouldn't mind a submission here in like the second round. I think Silva does pretty good in the first round, pressures Belgaroui, pushes him up against the fence. I think Belgaroui has a little bit of success with the takedown defense against the fence, but I do think Silva just will be a little bit too much pressure-wise. And honestly, I could be completely wrong here. Belgaroui can honestly go out there. He has shown a better job of keeping a good distance and landing some good shots and kind of just moving out of the way, but he does have this thing where he does drop his hands a little bit more, and he isn't the most defensive guy at times. But Marco Tulio Silva, good gym he trains at. Although Yousri Belgaroui does train with Teixeira MMA Fitness, and he does train with Gilbert Teixeira, and you kind of assume that he probably is going to be working on his ground game a little bit more. You saw Alex Pereira, who I think has like a black belt in jiu-jitsu, who is at least somewhat educated on the ground, has been in MMA a little bit longer than Belgaroui. He's still getting taken down, although he does have some decent takedown offense. He is getting taken down in general. So I think Silva, who does have really good grappling, can end up actually submitting Belgaroui probably in the later part of this fight. I think probably late second round. I don't mind this one going to decision either, but I do like Silva in this matchup. I don't know the odds for this fight. I'm going to assume Silva's going to be the slight favorite in this matchup. I think it is a very tricky fight to predict here. I can just see Belgaroui actually catching Silva in this matchup because he does have that shootbox style where he will just kind of just walk towards you and leave himself open there. So maybe Belgaroui can land some really good shots, but I just edge it more to Silva here. I think he's going to be better in the grappling department. I think he can land some really good shots on the feet. He does have really good power in his hands. I think he can do really good in this fight. And Tapology is agreeing with me here. 70% for Silva, 65% by TKO, 9% by submission, and 19% by decision. I don't mind the TKO. Maybe he does take him down and just ground and pound him. I'm not too confident in the submission area because I feel like he can definitely finish him due to like TKO strikes, but I can also see him submitting him. But I do think he ends up getting the finish. I don't necessarily know how, though. I do see late second round. I won't say submission, but I can just see a tired Belgaroui on the ground just not being able to defend himself, not being able to get himself up, and then Silva just pounding away on him, or even just hopping on and getting a submission. So I am going to go with Silva here. I don't know if he ends up finishing him like on the feet. Maybe he does. Maybe Belgaroui just gets that tired and Silva does all the work he can on the ground, and it's just a little bit easier for him. But I do see him just getting a takedown later in the second part of this fight, getting him down, super tired Belgaroui, and just pounding away on him and getting that finish in a later part of the second round. So that's what I have here. I'm going with Marco Tulio Silva by finish in the second round. The card, we have a very interesting matchup with Timothy Cuamba and Mateo Vogel. And Cuamba is going to be way better than Mateo Vogel on the feet here. Mateo Vogel kind of just feels like he just throws stuff to get his takedowns, but Cuamba, really good power in his hands, very active on the feet, takes shots, really good at slipping and countering. Very good fighter, actually solid wrestling as well. I think he's like 25 years of age, a very, very raw prospect coming up. I think actually if he does lose this fight, I would like to see him back on the Contender Series or in the UFC at some point, because of just how much potential he does have. This is at 145 as well. So he could be definitely a very interesting prospect coming up later on, especially when he starts to enter his prime, when he gets a little bit more bouts and he gets a little bit better. If he does lose this one, he definitely has a decent shot at winning this. Mateo Vogel, BFL champ. It is actually a very, very good grappler. I think if this one stays on the feet, Cuamba will absolutely school him and possibly finish him. But if this one goes on the ground, Mateo Vogel, I think, will have a really good shot here. Now, if Cuamba does go out there and like out-scramble him, I am going to get a little worried when I do make this pick. But I am going to go with Mateo Vogel. He's a very good grappler. Ended up facing Damon Blackshear, an amateur at CFFC. Actually looked good in the second round, or at least for a prospect when you're kind of looking at Contender Series fights, you kind of just want to see like him versus like a UFC fighter. You kind of get that here. He actually lost 29-28 decision, but ended up getting the second round off of Damon Blackshear, got a good takedown. I think he jumped like a guillotine or something, but actually put him in a couple areas of trouble. Of course, you know, Damon Blackshear, third ever twister in the UFC, lost to Mario Batista, who's actually, I don't know if he's top 15, but probably right outside the top 15 of bantamweight, but has actually looked pretty good in the UFC so far. I think he's gone even and then one draw there, but Mateo Vogel actually had Damon Blackshear in more trouble than Luan Lacerda, who actually thought had really, really good grappling, and I thought Luan Lacerda would have put Damon Blackshear in a lot of trouble on the ground, but although it was like 2 years later, I still think that is actually pretty impressive from Mateo Vogel, especially going into a Contender Series fight. Had him in a lot of trouble at certain points. I think he even had his back, like went for a lot of knee bars that almost went in at certain points. So he did look really good against a very good grappler and Damon Blackshear. And I think he can get it done against Timothy Cuamba, kind of just throw some stuff. And now it does worry me that like Cuamba could just go out there and just KO him and finish him up on the ground. But I think if he does hurt him, he cannot jump on him and go into his guard, because Mateo Vogel is so dangerous on the ground. But if he does drop him, Timothy Cuamba, tell him to stand back up and fight him again, even though it is pretty dangerous for him to just stand him back up, and Mateo Vogel does have another chance at attempting a takedown. I think it will be better than just entering the guard of Mateo Vogel. But if you can land some like ground and pound shots or some follow-ups, then I guess that would be a little bit better for Cuamba, because he is going to be a lot better than him on the feet. But I think Mateo Vogel goes out there in the first round, I think he lands a couple shots, just does a 1-2 and then shoots immediately. I think Cuamba will probably be ready for it, but I think Vogel's just going to be super strong, get the takedown, possibly take his back. He does have some really good back takes out there, really good body triangle, and does kind of the Aljamain Sterling thing where he just punches on guys, but he will attempt for submissions a little bit more than an Aljamain Sterling will, but has very good grappling, of course, like I said, has a lot of stuff in his arsenal, a lot of knee bars, a lot of back takes. Rear naked choke in his last fight, won that one by KO ground and pound of BFL. Was this a majority decision win, rear naked choke? So it's actually over Garrett Armfield, who I think just fought in the UFC. Now that I think about it, I actually didn't see this one when I thought about it. But yeah, he is in the UFC, a 9-3 opponent. So actually, that's actually a very good one to have. Rear naked choke. I completely forgot that was there, but good win over Garrett Armfield as well, who I think just won, especially on the last card. So Mateo Vogel, I think, will win this one, possibly by submission, like rear naked choke. I think he gets the takedown. I think he's a little bit more experienced than Cuamba at this point. I do think Cuamba, of course, does have a chance here, but I think Vogel will just be too strong in the grappling. I think he'll kind of just have his way with him on the ground. But we'll see how this one goes. I wouldn't be surprised if Timothy Cuamba does end up finishing Vogel here. I think this one could possibly be like an under 1.5 play. I don't know. Mateo Vogel might not be able to finish him in that first round, but I think he definitely has a pretty good shot. 89% of Tapology is picking Vogel in this match, 75% by submission, 15% by decision. I don't know where they're seeing KO, TKO. Maybe they're just thinking ground and pound shots, I guess. And that's after he takes him down, of course, because I don't see him having any success on the feet against Cuamba. But I think he does really good here. Again, Cuamba has really good upset potential, so if they do disrespect him in the odds, maybe it might be worth, or at least I might put a little bit of money on Cuamba in this one, but I am going to go with Vogel, but I am going to go with him by submission here. I don't know if he gets the TKO shots, but I do think he just ends up getting the rear naked choke. Probably just lands a couple shots that irritate Cuamba and just ends up getting it in the later part of the first round. I think he gets the takedown very early as well. So Vogel, I think, he just has a little bit more complex game for Cuamba at this point in his career, and that's why I think he'll do a little bit better here. So I'm going to go Mateo Vogel by rear naked choke submission. In the later part of the first round, I can definitely see this one being a second round finish as well here. So let's move on. Up the card, we have Chandler Cole versus Thomas Petersen. I am going to go with I was almost just said Chandler Cole. I'm not going with Chandler Cole. I'm going with Thomas Petersen in this one. Chandler Cole, I think, was on The Ultimate Fighter. I don't remember him on the show. I think he was like season 30 or something like that. Season 29. Season 29 was middleweights and like bantamweights or whatever. Season 30 was the heavyweights and the women's fighters. He did lose to Jordan Heiderman, which I guess Heiderman ended up going into the PFL playoffs or something like that. So he has had a decent career, I guess. Lost to Anti Deliha at PFL. But he's not the best of fighters. I'm going to be completely honest. He's built like Chris Barnett. And in his last fight, weirdly enough, it did kind of look like a Chris Barnett on top of Jake Collier. If you remember that, where Chris Barnett's just landing some ground and pound shots, like he's just so heavy that Jake Collier just couldn't get up. That's what it felt like with his last fight with Victor Jones. He kind of just took him down and like laid on him and just started throwing punches, which was pretty interesting. But Thomas Petersen, a very decent fighter. I think he'll just be better than Richard Foster. I think he gets the takedown. I think he just completely destroys him on the ground as well. So I think this is the first round finish for Thomas Petersen in this one. I don't see Chandler Cole doing anything to Thomas Petersen. Let's be real. If your tough season as a winner is Mo Usman, it's not a very good look, because I don't think Mo Usman is the best of fighters in general. And if you're losing in the first round, and Jordan Heiderman was actually a guy that a lot of people were looking out for on that show, but I don't know. It's not a bad loss to have, but I just think Thomas Petersen just goes out there, takes him down. Is just going to be a little bit more skilled than Chandler Cole in this matchup. So I think he ends up winning this one by finish in the heavyweight division. He will have a 3-inch reach advantage, but I mean, Thomas Petersen is just 100% more skilled than him in this one. So I wonder what the odds will be. My guess is he's probably going to be like a minus 250, minus 225 going into this one. But Thomas Petersen, first round finish. I'll say TKO, but I think he does have a few submissions. No, he kind of just ground and pounds these guys, I guess. I think he put his last opponent completely out cold. Richard Foster, very massive dude. He's like 6'7" or something, 83 inches of reach. I'm like, God damn, like this dude must be pretty good. Nope. Took him down and just put him out cold. So Thomas Petersen has looked impressive. I haven't really seen that for Chandler Cole. I think Petersen wins this one in the first. Up the card, we have Dylan Salvador versus Bolaji Oki. Now, this one's going to be a very fun fight. I'm going to be completely honest. Bolaji Oki kind of is like a scrappier dude. He's not going to be the most technical guy like a Dylan Salvador, who's going to be more patient. He's going to wait for shots. He's going to be quicker than Oki, but Oki definitely has the power in his hands, does have some takedowns in his game, but I think Salvador is going to be able to get out of the way of those. I think by the time, let's put it this way, by the time Oki does take down Salvador, I think he will probably be hurt. Salvador does weirdly have like submission wins on his record, even though he's a predominantly stand-up guy. I think he has 4 submissions here. Was his rear naked choke, anaconda choke. I think won by Von Flute choke relatively recently. So he just ends up on top of these guys and finishes them by submission here. And I think that could be definitely a play. But I think Dylan Salvador is just going to be the much more patient guy. I think he's going to land the better shots here. Bolaji Oki, his last fight, fought not his last fight, but the fight before it, Nair Malekian, 13-0 guy. And I was kind of just looking through. I was like, oh, wow, this guy must be a pretty good prospect. I watched this fight. It's actually a pretty fun scrap to watch. I did think Bolaji Oki did win that one for sure. But this guy has a lot of 0-0 victories as well, I'll say. Isn't the best of fighters, I'm going to be completely honest. Kind of just has a Fed record there, and then went on Titan FC, which is actually a pretty solid promotion, and then it just ended up being a no contest there. So pretty, I don't know, you don't know about this guy too much, but weirdly enough, the YouTube comments had a lot of fans of Nair Malekin, which is fine, but I guess they think he got robbed in that one, which I thought was kind of crazy. But Salvador, getting onto this fight, is a very, very patient dude, very fast kicks. I think just going into his record, actually, it's pretty interesting. Has a little bit of a kickboxing record as well, and does have a win over Giga Chikadze, which I think is a very, very good win to have 100%, because Giga Chikadze, especially recently, looked pretty good in his last fight against Alex Caceres. And I think if you're getting kickboxing wins over a guy like Giga Chikadze, and I know this is MMA, but I think Salvador can get the win over Bolaji Oki, possibly by submission. I think Salvador can land some really good shots down the middle, and then end up, like, I guess, landing a couple head kicks. Because, again, Salvador is just another one of those guys that, just like the guy first opening up this card, Prates, I think is how you say his name. Really good kicks, very, very fast. I think he just can catch Oki and then maybe potentially get into a submission here with Oki looking for takedowns, maybe just reversing position a little bit more and getting the submission there. I think it'll just be one of those weird things here. I think it's going to be a first-round finish as well. I'm predicting a lot of first-round finishes, but this is actually I think it's going to be a very wild fight early on, which you kind of see a lot of the time with these main events that the UFC puts on with the Contender Series. I think it'll be a very wild first round. We'll start out a little bit slower, but Bolaji Oki is very open on the feet, and I think he can definitely get caught by Salvador here. Maybe Salvador just wins by ground and pound, but I don't mind him winning by submission. Bolaji Oki, when he does look for takedowns, kind of just controls them on the ground, doesn't really have too much for some of these guys on the ground. And I think Oki is actually favored by Tapology. Won this one 77% by KO, 14% by decision, 70% picked by Oki, 30% Salvador, 26% by TKO, 34% by submission, and 34% by decision. I am taking Salvador in this one. I think he's going to be more patient. Oki's way too open on the feet. I think he can land some better shots here. He's going to be faster. Even though Oki's the younger fighter, I still think he can get it done by finish. I don't know, because Salvador is a very weird fighter. I can see him getting the submission or KO victory here in the first round, but I do think it does end in the first round either way. Maybe Bolaji Oki, if he does win, it might go on a little bit longer, but even then, Oki does start to tire out through his fight. So I think as this fight goes on, I wouldn't be too confident in Oki either. He did tire out quite a bit against Nair Malekian. Malekian is how I'll say his name. Did tire out there, even though it was kind of a scrap and he was doing a lot in that fight. He did tire out pretty badly as that fight went on. So I think for Dylan Salvador, it'll just be a little bit easier to land those shots, especially as this fight goes on. So maybe it won't end in the first round, but I don't know. I can just see this being a scrap in the first, and then Salvador just catching him with a head kick, landing some really good shots, Oki going down and submitting him, or maybe Oki just shoots in for a takedown and Salvador just goes on his back or something, gets like a rear naked choke, and ends up getting a submission. So I am going to go to Salvador, first round finish in this one. Let me know what you guys think about this card. Who do you guys have in the main event? And I'll see you guys next time.